Good afternoon. Welcome to
Good afternoon.
Conversations with KOAI, Island Voices Global Vision. I'm your host, Kamoy Isaac, and this is the space where real people share real stories and powerful ideas from the Caribbean to the world. We dive into conversations about culture, business, relationships, growth, and the experiences that shape our lives. If you're ready for authentic perspective and meaningful dialogue, you're in the right place. So sit back, tune in, and let's get the conversation started. Once again, good afternoon. We have our first guest with us today, Kwame Francis, who is my brother. I'm sure you can see the resemblance. Um, an original Jennings man, as we would say. So it's only fit that we start off this podcast with someone from the village, as the goal is to get persons in the village knowing about persons who have migrated or even the history of the village. Over the coming weeks, we are going to divulge into cultural conversations with different persons. But the sole base of this podcast is to have persons learn about Jennings and Ebenezer first, and then Antigua and culture on a whole. So we have Kwame Francis. We're going to get started right into it. Good afternoon, Kwame. How are you doing?
Hey, bro. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, and thank you for being a part of my first episode, my first podcast. Something new for me. I'm not used to this or like this, but it's been on my heart for at least a year to have something like this done where I can have the community and culture and Antigua and a whole be out there for the public. So you're going to get started. Start by you telling us who is Kwame Francis.
Oh man, that's a good question. I used to say Kwame is a skinny boy from Jennings Gut. But I guess not so skinny anymore. So I guess a boy from Jennings Gut. Love my village. The son of Yolanda, Isaac, and Everton Francis. Father recently deceased, and I really love the Jennings and Ebenezer community. Grew up, in the community. Spend a lot of time involved with sports and football, etc. And so my heart is really knit, to the village and to the people of the village.
That is very good. That's good to know. Condolences in the past, in your father who passed recently, Everton. Jennings would
Thank you.
know Everton very well, although he's from, well, he lived in Bowlands. I don't know exactly where he's from. Is he from Bowlands as well? Or he's a Jennings man as well? Well, he's a Jennings man by
Well,
nature, by now.
yeah, he was born in Borlands, but he grew up in Jennings. He grew up across from where the clinic is, across the street there. And so, so he's both. He claimed both Jennings and Borlands.
Yeah. And Jennings would definitely claim him. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So how was it like for you growing up in Jennings?
I have really fond memories of my childhood in Jennings. I think about community. You think about the concept of you can go borrow sugar from somebody. People knew one another. People were cordial. Everyone looked out for one another. You didn't have to lock your doors back in the day. I would spend a lot of time, at my childhood friend's house rally, up by Angela, and we would, walk the streets all time of the day and night, greet people. People were really cordial at one another. You knew who people were in the community. You know each other's families, each other's children, and there was this sense of togetherness and this sense of unity. I will say one thing that I remember vividly as a child. Hurricane Hugo, I think that was 1989, and I'm going back a little bit. And after the devastation of that hurricane, one of the things that stood out to me is that members of the football team, Jennings United at the time, mainly young men, we went from house to house, picking up trees, fence, and debris. And we started at one house, so we really went around the entire village and did cleanup. And so everyone was looking out for each other. Nobody said, or I'm just going to take care of me and mine. We took care of the entire community, and that's how I grew up in the village, and that's those are some of the fondest memories that I have even to this day.
Yeah, and to go off of your last point where you said everybody in the village were together, even now, so from my perspective, I believe the village is more so separated, where that togetherness, that family aspect of Janice Ebenezer is no longer there. And that's not to say that it's the persons that are here now fault, but whatever encountered is most of the persons in the village are not actually from the village. So they don't know the persons in the village are not comfortable, so they just be home and work and that's it. You see persons walking to the village is like, who the person, who that is? Like up to yesterday, I was at my grandmother's gallery, it was like in Antigua and they're like, who them they? I'm like, I was like, I was told by my cousin they live in Jennings at least 10 years, but they're not from Jennings. I don't know those persons, you know. That part of the aspect I think we need to get back to us togetherness as one. And with that said, I believe when we get back to the aspect, we can also be our neighbor's keeper. Look out for your neighbor. Neighbor's not home. Make sure your house is safe. No one is in the yard and that type of stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things I will say is that change is inevitable, and not all change is bad. And I will say I haven't lived in Antigua for quite some time now. Just come and visit, for a week or two. And so all the changes I'm not familiar with. But I will say this is that, even from childhood, if you had somebody new who moved into the village, one of the ways that they would assimilate, and I'm saying this from a young man's perspective,
Mhm.
is through sports. So playing football, cricket, or basketball. If you were not involved in sports, it was so difficult to make connections. And so most of the people who I know, whether they come from, different islands across the Caribbean or even different villages, um, for people outside of Antigua who don't know, we don't. Villages don't move villages easy. Maybe through marriage, you marry to somebody, move to a different village. But if you grow up in a village, the tendency is
Yeah.
that's where you stay the rest of your life. It's not like America. You're born in New York and you move to Florida and then you move somewhere else or you move to a different city. In Antigua, generally the culture is not that. And so even with, globalization, you start to see some of those changes where people are moving through villages. But you have sports, I remember is one of those ways where people would come together and get to know people.
Yeah, and so that's a big part of the issue we have now in terms of sports too. Sports persons in the village, I mean, has evolved. Culture and sports, football in general, and cricket as a whole, has evolved. So before we had a Jennings team of predominantly Jennings and Ebenezer members or players, you have players from all over coming to Jennings and Ebenezer, and we look at it as a lack of developments in sports in general, where there's no proper structures in place for persons in the village to get into sports. So persons that coming from elsewhere with structural development are automatically pushed to the top of such teams per se. So that's a very good point. So for yourself,
You,
go ahead.
mhm. No, no, go ahead.
Okay, so how do you see yourself now giving back to your community? I know growing up you were an avid football player for Jennings and Antigua at some stage. So how do you see yourself now giving back to Jennings, whether it be sports or even in your profession as a doctor? How do you see yourself giving back to your community?
That's a good question. It's something that's always on my heart to do. And pre-COVID, pre the pandemic in 2029, in conjunction with
2019.
JEC 2019. Thank you. In conjunction with Jennings and Ebenezer Connection, the president Al Martin, we did a health fair in the community, and that was something that was supposed to continue at least on an annual basis. It was really successful. The turnout and the response was great. People, came early in the morning and left late at night, and everyone who came got served. And so that's something I'm supposed to continue, interrupted by some of the transitions that happened with COVID. But that's something that I want to continue doing. Just being a blessing to the community through health, and also being in conversation with many persons as it relates to sports, and not just even though I'm a footballer, I think all sports are important for community and youth development, and to build togetherness and character. And so, just talking about a Jennings sports club, I've been talking to some people in the community about that, and it has had those conversations in the past, whether contributing financially, providing supplies, coming, doing coaching, providing resources. And so, those are some of the things that I'm actively involved in now, and looking forward to ramping up in the future.
That is very very good. And coming back from somebody from Jennings gut, we love to see that in the community as a whole, of persons giving back. I can speak briefly on behalf of JC. I know, being a part of the executive team for JC, I know they have some things planned. We're going to refocus and come back this year stronger. We're in the process now of relaunching our website and rebranding and that type of stuff. So no, for this year, although it's already March, we're going to be pushing to get some stuff done this year.
Excellent. Glad to hear.
Yes. So you said earlier that you haven't lived in Antigua for a while. I know how long being your brother. I think he moved from Antigua in 1998, um, which is some time ago. I was 8.
Some time ago, almost 30 years.
That tells you my age and your age. If I was 8, yes, in 1998, and you moved
It's really 97.
97. Okay, 97, 98.
I went
Yes,
to college in 97.
yes. Okay, so you moved to the United States for college. So what's directed your path to the United States, and what made you choose the profession you are in now?
But really, college was, the thing, people always say, Antiguans don't help Antiguans, and that is not true. So I was in school. I went to secondary school at St. Joseph Academy. Big up all the academy, man.
Yes.
Um, and I had friends who went to college, particularly they're from Johnson's Point, me and Tony Roberts. And they were in college, and the school was actually starting uh, a football team. It was brand new, and they told the coach about me, and the coach called me and offered me a scholarship, and so I went to Iowa, played football, collegiate football, soccer in at Iowa Wesleyan College for 4 years. We were second team all conference and all academic. And while I was in school, I did a lot of science classes, and I'm not a person for the lab. I don't really like basic research that much. I like to interact with people. So when I looked at my resume and looked at the science classes that I had, I said, um, how can I best serve humanity, through the sciences, knowing that I like to interact with people. And so medicine became a natural fit. And so I applied to medical school, got accepted to medical school at Wayne State University in the beautiful city of Detroit, where I have
313.
been 313. And
Yes.
as today is the 14th, we just celebrated the 313 day.
Yesterday.
So I've been in Detroit, interestingly now, for just about half of my life. So I actually claim Detroit and Antigua equally, because I've spent equal time in both places. So I'll say I'm as much Detroit as I am Antiguan, just by virtue of the time that I've spent in both places, and the investment that I've made into both places, and an investment of both places I've made into me.
Yes.
So big up Detroit, big up all the Breakers, massive.
Yes, indeed. I must say Detroit has a part to play in my life as well. I was up to this day, I still say the best years of my life were spent in Detroit. That's where, if persons
Yeah,
don't know, that's where I went to university. I actually lived with my brother for what, maybe 4.5 years, I believe, at the university
yeah,
in Detroit. And the examples that were set for me as a man, At the time, young man, I thought it was crazy. But, as you grow older and you see things, I mean, he didn't say a lot, but his actions said a lot. Um, and we had a pastor. We're still a pastor of Breakers Covenant Church. Man, that man, Army Signs. I'm gonna try to get him on life, but to this day, I still structure my life off of lessons learned um, from 2011 until 2015 while I was in Detroit. I don't think I'm ever going to move away from that
Mm.
because that foundation there, although late for me, that I was 21 at that stage, still or is still playing a part in who I am today and the man that I still want to become because I'm still learning and evolving each day.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
man. The Breakers family is a wonderful place to build structure and to build character. To build godliness. So you talk about 21. I was in my early 20s when I came to Breakers as well, mid 20s.
yes,
And the things that I learned from Aramis and the Breakers family, it is like you said, it's still the things that guide my life today.
yes, and not to go off so much, but a lot of persons, I'm trying to go off a little bit, but even in the Detroit family, a lot of persons don't realize how young the pastor was at that stage. And for the example that he sets at a man, I think he started pastor at 22,
Yeah.
and at 22, if I was pastoring, boy, I honestly would take everybody to hell. At 22, and the example that he had, and man, that tells the type of person that he is. And so you can imagine the type of person he is now, some 25 years later, I believe, or something like that.
Yeah, 24,
Yes. So that's
24 years later, 23 going on 24.
yes. So yes. Back to it now. So you moving away. What are some of the struggles you had migrating, being not in your home country and being away from family and friends?
Well, I said that's the biggest thing is the family support. Um, the family support is critical. Being far from family, there's a lot of milestone moments, that I missed. One thing that I said in 30 years, I've never been in the same country with my mother for her birthday or for Mother's Day. So that's something. So miss a lot of birthdays, a lot of anniversaries, a lot of celebrations. Miss some funerals. So loved ones who passed away, you're not there to grieve with your family. So those things are really, really difficult. And also when you migrate, it's like part of it you are never it's difficult to be fully accepted into the place you move to. So you're not 100%, I'll say, American. And then when you go back to Antigua, then you're too American. So you're not Antiguan enough for Antiguans. So you're not American enough for Americans. So leaves you in this weird place. So even though talking, accent is a little bit different. The Antiguans will hear different an accent. The Americans will hear, this doesn't sounds different. Doesn't quite sound American. So you end up in this middle ground, trying to figure out and to carve your own path. So that has been challenging.
Yes, that I can attest to that as well as having been to university in the States, although not for long. Presses may say that I was with family, but if I am to be honest, when I moved in with you, that's me living with you after what 15 years of not living with you. So I was 8 when I left, or
Yeah,
7 when I left Antigua. So part of it was like, yeah, I know Kwame is my brother, but I mean, still learning Kwame at this stage, who Kwame is at that stage. It's almost like I'm learning a stranger. I don't know you're my brother. The gap between
yeah,
8 and 21 is like is significant at that stage. So it was a learning process for me as well, during that stage, which I appreciate as well.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's so true. Yeah, yeah. It's a learning curve, and when you come back to Antigua, say you move, you come back, and you left as a young adult or teenager, you come back as a full grown adult. The person who left is not necessarily the person who come back because you gain um so many things. Like people really equate me with football when I come back, and people ask me about football, but the truth is I haven't played competitive football in a long time.
yeah,
So even though it's ingrained in me, it's not a part of my everyday day to day life. And so people's memories are stuck. at where they last saw you, and vice versa. Sometimes our memories are stuck where we last saw people, or people grow and they change and they mature, and different things happen in their life. Experiences shape, their worldview and their outlook, and so that is a challenge as well.
Yes, it is. And to go back a little bit, you spoke briefly about migrating. Um, and having listened to your program or snippet of your radio show last week, it's a sensitive topic now in the United States or even globally as to what is going on. So for persons that did not see or hear your take, can you briefly explain it again what your take is on what is going on, even biblically from your point of view?
Can you be more specific with that question? Like, I know I talk about a lot of things on the radio show. My
So
take on which
you
topic?
you you had a snippet on your Facebook page in terms of migration, in terms of
Oh,
foreigners.
got you,
Yes, in terms of that.
got you,
So down
got you,
that
got
line,
you.
yes, I
Yeah.
know that's sensitive. That's a sensitive topic now for persons, even in Antigua. It's affecting persons. I would say like I didn't even want to come to the states. I have a valid visa, but it's like it's affecting persons. And a part of me, if I'm looking at the personal
Yeah.
point of view, is like I didn't want to touch the topic because social media um is out there for everyone. But I was like, what if I'm scared to touch the topic? What does that do for me? Out
Yeah.
of fear of touching that topic. Though it's sensitive, there is a right way, there's a wrong
Yeah.
way. So we need to touch it, but touch it, we have to know how to touch it. So from your point of view, for persons that have not seen the snippet, you can just kind of explain it again. Um,
Okay.
your point of view
Well,
on the
I'll
stage.
give I'll give a shameless plug. Since you mentioned a radio show, I do a radio show called Sound Culture, gospel radio show, and you can check out all the shows on my YouTube page. It's Solo Christus, SOLOCHRISTU. A reference. And it said, treat foreigners as if they were native born Israelites. And it goes on to say, remember that you were once strangers and foreigners in Egypt. So God was like, look, you didn't like when you were foreigners and you got mistreated. When foreigners come among you, don't treat them bad. No, so it just talk teach us how to treat one another. So whether we are I'm an Antiguan in America or you're a Jamaican living in Antigua, treat people like you would want to be treated. Treat them like they'd be natives. Now there's something to be said about illegal immigration. I don't think borders of any place should just be open for anybody to become. There's an immigration process, there's applications, that. I think that system should be followed. Um, and if there is illegal entry, I think that should be taken care of following the structure of the law. So you don't break the law to enforce the law, right? And what we see happening now is that individuals are breaking the law in an effort to enforce the law.
Yes, yes.
Every country is sovereign. Antigua is a sovereign country. Antigua and Barbuda, sovereign. America is sovereign. Venezuela is sovereign. Iran is sovereign. Cuba is sovereign. And whether or not we like the way that they run their countries, whether or not we like their political structure, it is still sovereign. I give an example, and I say this as a pastor. So I counsel with people all the time. And as a pastor, I don't get to dictate how people live their lives. I give them counsel and advice from the Word of God. But I can't walk into a man's house and tell that man how to handle his wife, how to handle his children, how to handle his finances. If he asks for wisdom and advice from the Word of God, I can provide that. But another man's house is not my house. And I would be wrong and I'll be overstepping my boundary if I walk into another man's house and try to run his house. That is wrong. Even if he's not running his house correctly. That's called usurping authority. And the Bible talks really strongly about usurping authority. David didn't even want to touch Saul when Saul was acting up, because Saul was the authority figure, right? And so dealing with people who are set in authority, even if you don't like how they function, that has to be handled, carefully, and with godly wisdom. So we don't just get to go into another country and because we don't like their internal affairs and how their internal affairs, don't align with ours, you know, deal with their country the way that we would deal with ours. That is not right. It's not biblical. There's no biblical precedence, for that. And so that's what I was talking about on the radio show, and just using the Word of God as a guide to to talk about what's happening currently, because the show is called Sound Culture, and sound means firm, it means secure, unwavering, and culture has to do with the way that we live our lives. And so, what I do on this show is that I use the Word of God to add structure and discipline to the culture that we live in, outside of just whatever our feelings might be. And so that's what you're alluding to. Hopefully, that answers your question to
Yeah.
some degree.
Yes, that answers my question perfectly. And now that are we on that topic, faith and family to you, I know they're big in your life. Know your life is structured around faith and structure in terms of that way. As a young person, turn your life to Christ. I don't know how long ago you did that. How was it for you? I can recall me in your transition. I know you're a big Beanie Man fan and that type of stuff. So for the younger years of my life, I can recall the transition. But for you, how was that transition into being a young man and not popular, becoming a Christian? And how was it model your life now to the person you are now and family? How is that incorporated for you?
Oh, it's a great question. So I was 19. I was a freshman in college when I gave my life to Christ. And if you know anything about being in college, living in a dorm and on campus, just think about all young people living together with no adult supervision, right? You can be as free, as wild, as loose as you would like to be. And that's the time that God captured my heart. So when everybody's going to party and doing this and doing that, when you don't have your mother and your father around to tell you have to come in at a certain time or do this at a certain time. Um, so it was the time of my life that it was the time that I was supposed to live and express myself and experience the world. And that's the time God captured my heart. Now I grew up in church, and many people thought I was saved, but I wasn't saved. If going to church don't make you saved. Being giving your life to Christ and letting Him dictate your life. That's what salvation is about. It's about God taking the wheel and ordering your steps. So at 19, I brought God into my life to order my steps. I will say it was difficult. In the beginning, I had resentment um, I'll say resentment towards just my upbringing, because even though I was brought up in church, at 18, 19 years old, I had 18, 19 years of worldly living and trying to get that world out of my system. Even as you mentioned, Beanie Man, I was going to clubs. I was, going to Lions all night, country pond with burning flames and, carnival and all this other stuff. So that was in my system, and trying to detox and get that out of my system was really difficult. And so when I got saved, I wish that I didn't have all of that in my system to deal with. And so I had a transition where it was, I mean, I love God from the beginning. I studied, I read, I prayed. I didn't need nobody to take me to Bible study. I would study on my own. Actually study at a feverish pace before somebody would, you know, study the Bible with me. I would study, and I was evangelizing from day one. I started to bring people to Christ. Actually, from day one, I became a campus minister, like right away. So it's like when I got serious, I got serious. There wasn't no like, oh, let me try this out and see what happens. I jumped headfirst in, and it's been like that ever since. But it did have its challenges because, like you said, the dance hall and all of that, I had to
Yeah,
work that out of my system. And as you see, God didn't really work it out of my system. If you ever listen to the music I play,
yeah,
he repurposed it, for his glory.
yeah. And I have a say in terms of music. You may say not all music and not all songs are bad songs. So culturally, if Kemwa is a Christian and Kemwa drives on listen to a Beenie Man song or Kemwa backslide, but what is the message behind that particular song? I have a song on my phone now. I've used it for years as a ringtone by Kess, and I think is um, remember Kess featuring David rather. He says the song pretty much says, "Live your life like you're playing mass. You know, on Carnival Monday and Tuesday, everybody's friend. There's no haters per se on the road. You're trying to have fun." So the general message behind the song is if you can, if for 2 days you can have fun with everybody, why not have that same fun or fellowship with those persons over a lifetime? So
Yeah,
that's the message behind um, that song. So I have that. So with that said, I want to thank you for um, your time. Thank you for being a part of the first episode. Um, maybe along the line, we're going to come back and have a deeper conversation in terms of relationships and that type of stuff. But thank
yeah,
you for the start. I have persons lined up. So next week, for example, we have Jonathan Joseph lined up, who's a senator, who's the hopeful for St. Mary's North next week um, lined up. So it's going to go along. Then we have cultural aspects coming along and history of the village and that type of stuff coming along. So I want to thank you for being a part of this. It's how would I put it for me? It's me coming out of my comfort zone in um
yeah.
terms of this. I think the mic stopped. I don't know how far long the mic stopped,
Yeah,
but I think
yeah.
the
I
mic
got
died.
you.
But yeah,
I heard you know. Come on.
yes, I said I think the mic stopped during my little ending speech. I don't know long.
You're just saying you come out of your comfort zone. That's the last we heard.
Yeah, so yes, it's not me, but I'm out of my comfort zone doing this weekly. The days will be changed, rotated between Fridays and Saturdays depending on the persons. So for next week, for example, we're going at next week Saturday at 8 p.m. But after that, I'm hoping to do Friday nights at 7. What time will tell depending on the persons and the availability and their schedule.
Excellent, man. This is good, and thank God for you coming out of your comfort zone as a big brother. I'm definitely proud of you for taking this step, and for listening to the voice of God to have this important conversation, to highlight our community, highlight our culture.
Yes. Yes, so you're welcome, bro. Thank you again. Um,